In my opinion, the unblending procedure in IFS is the most efficient and comprehensive method of de-identification I ever come across. It may be one of the most important aspects of IFS and the therapy in general, because without it, we couldn't access the self in such an elegant way, or gain such a direct experiential proof of parts and their influence on our inner world. To continue with unblending, sometimes I move directly into unblending, but in the early stages of therapy, I recommend spending time simply feeling the presence of the part. This helps the client settle into the relationship and make it feel real. We initiate unblending by focusing attention on the part and inviting the client to ask it to step back, to give some space, as if they were asking another person. Another way is asking, "How do you feel toward this part?" This question initiates unblending because it requires the client to take a slight shift in perspective, just enough to notice the part rather than speak as it. This signals a movement from blending toward relatedness. Even if subtle, that movement begins to open space inside the system. Once the client focuses on the part, I encourage them to let the answer come naturally. Usually, a response arises quickly, but not always. There are two main responses when we ask a part to step back. The part steps away, and separation is achieved, or the part resists the request. If there's no answer at all, it may mean we've lost connection, or another part has taken over. In either case, our task is to stay curious and follow the trail. Sometimes clients give flat or detached answers. This is usually a sign of either a lack of connection with the part or the presence of another protector blocking the process. If the part steps back, we move into getting to know it more deeply. I ask a few core questions. What is your name? What is your role? What do you fear would happen if you stop doing this? Do you like this job? How do you see the client? Especially, how old do you think they are? These answers often reveal the essence of the protector's logic, its fears, strategies, and beliefs about what the client needs in order to survive. In the third module, I'll list all the questions that can be asked. Often, the fear of stopping is central. It may say,
"If I move aside, she'll fall apart. If I step back, the pain will crush her. If I stop pushing her, she'll never amount to anything. She'd be a lazy slob."
Some even fear they'll cease to exist without their role. We take these fears seriously. They often mirror the fears of the person or system the part originally adapted to. We never force a part to separate. Instead, we work to establish mutual cooperation and trust. When that trust grows, protectors often become allies in the work. If they're unwilling to separate, we continue exploring their concerns and fears about potential unblending. These answers are similar to the fears we hear when asking what might happen if they stop performing their role, and each one must be addressed. We work to ensure safety around those concerns. If a part fears it will fall apart, we reassure it that this will not happen. We ask it to step back just a little, temporarily, to see how that feels. Of course, sometimes it won't step back no matter what, and we have to respect that. I'll address the reasons for this in Module 3. At times, an exile may react, perhaps showing anger toward that protector, or fear about who would take care of them if the protector unblends. If necessary, we shift focus to the exile, acknowledge its position, and initiate unblending there. This might be the first time the client has ever felt separation from a part that's lived in their mind for decades. It can feel destabilizing at first, but I've never seen a client experience it as harmful. Most feel relief, even if confusion comes first. Importantly, parts often return to their usual roles shortly after a session or within a few days. Any confusion is temporary. Some clients also worry they're just imagining the part, but once a genuine connection forms, the distinction becomes clear. What's coming from the part versus what's being made up becomes obvious. In those rare cases where doubt persists, it usually belongs to another part, often a protector, that then becomes our new target, and we adjust accordingly. In the IFS process, a part that steps in with concerns about the work is called a concerned part. This can be any other part of the inner system. Sometimes a perfectionistic protector jumps in with concerns.
Am I doing this right?
Instead of connecting with the target part, the client starts thinking about how they should act, perform, or succeed in the exercise. When this happens, we pause the original task and gently shift to working with this concerned part first. Once the protector feels understood and safe enough to relax, we may ask it, "Can you show us the part you're protecting? Would it be okay for us to get to know that part?" This moment can mark a profound turning point in the therapeutic process. The client is no longer defined by the protector nor flooded by the exile, but now in a position to care for both. This is also where we begin working with the exile more directly, a process we'll explore further in Module 3. This perspective echoes Wilhelm Reich's observation that when we dismantle character resistance and defenses, we are led directly to the wound, the very heart of the issue. In IFS, that principle holds true. When protectors step back, we arrive at what they've been trying to manage or conceal all along, the vulnerable parts that carry our deepest pain. At each point, I also assess how much self-energy is present. Typically, the more the client is unblended from their parts, the more self emerges. A full process looks like this: accessing a part, identifying and connecting with a specific protector, unblending from the target part, separating the self from that protector so it can be observed without merging with it, unblending from concerned parts, separating from any other parts that might be worried about what will happen if we work with this protector, discovering the protector's positive intent, understanding its underlying protective purpose, even if its strategies are harmful, developing a trusting relationship with the protector, building enough rapport that it begins to cooperate rather than block. To demonstrate the whole process, including work with the exiles, I'd like to use an example from Jay Early's book. That way you'll get a sense how the process typically unfolds.